So up to this point, we've addressed a lot of specific problems in education that people in the United States are facing. But what are the kind of broader consequences of these specific problems? Well, a good way that we can kind of understand or contextualize the impact that all of these different problems of education in the United States that we have is to compare our system of education and our kind of success rates and our failures to other countries around the world and kind of position the United States in a global perspective. Well, you may be surprised to find that the United States ranks very far behind many other industrialized nations in terms of the quality of education that our citizens receive. Few instances of this. In the United States, students' science, math, and reading scores are nowhere near the top in comparison to other countries around the world. And the cost of education is definitely one of the greatest social problems that we are facing currently in the United States today. As all of you who are college students, I'm sure, are painfully aware, it costs a lot of money to go to college in the United States. The average cost of 1 year at a public university for an in-state student in the United States is over $20,000, and that increases to over $34,000 if you are from out of state. So as a result of these high expenses, today over 44 million Americans hold a total of $1.4 trillion of student debt. Wow, $1.4 trillion of student debt has accumulated in the United States today. That's pretty wild if you think about that, especially knowing that a number of other industrialized nations around the world offer free college education. Yes, free. Not just, low interest student loans or no interest student loans. No, there's countries around the world that offer free college education to their students. Some countries, get this, even pay college students a monthly stipend to help cover their living expenses. Do you get that? Some colleges will not only offer you free education, free college education, they'll actually pay you as a college student, as if it's your job, to actually live and afford the cost of living simply to go to school as a college student. So hearing this, you might question, well, why don't we do this in the United States? If there are other countries around the world that are able to not only cover the cost of education, but pay college students to go to college, what are we doing wrong in the US? Before we get to some solutions, let's take a closer look at Finland. Finland is one of these countries that really has a very different stance on how education should be treated in comparison to the US. Many sociologists have argued that the US could drastically improve our social problems in education and many other social problems, because if we recognize that having access to education, a quality education, is a driving factor that contributes to the likelihood that a person is able to achieve upward social mobility in this world, arguably, if we increase our problems or solve our problems in education, we could solve a lot of our social problems in the United States. Finland is often looked at as the gold star in terms of education around the world. It is constantly being recognized as having one of the best education systems globally. Their education system is very, very different than that of the US. So let's take a closer look at Finland and see if there's any lessons that we could learn as a society from other industrialized countries and improve our quality of education. Well, one thing Finland has done that has significantly improved their quality of education is that it raised teachers' salaries there. If you have any awareness about salary inequalities in the United States, I'm sure you're painfully aware about how awfully we pay our teachers, especially our K through 12 teachers in the United States. I mean, while they are typically required to have 4 degrees to teach full-time in those capacities, we pay them virtually nothing. I mean, I know teachers that are barely making it above that low-income family threshold, twice above the poverty line. And that's a reality for many educators in the US today. But in Finland, they decided that they're going to raise their teachers' salaries, so they're going to pay them far above what teachers are getting paid in the US, and they're going to require all teachers in Finland, all K through 12 teachers, to have a 3-year master's degree, but they're going to pay for all of the costs of that. So they're going to pay for not only your 4-year college degree, they're going to pay for you to go to graduate school in Finland to become an extremely qualified, high-trained teacher, and they're going to pay for it all. right? How cool is that? And that includes that living stipend that we mentioned before. So they're not only going to pay for these teachers to get their 3-year master's degree on the top of their 4-year bachelor's degree, they're actually going to pay them to do it. So for the graduate education needed to achieve that degree, like I said, they're going to get paid to go to school. That's awesome. They're going to foot the bill, increasing the quality of education that students receive, and also increasing the socioeconomic status of teachers by not requiring them to take out tens of thousands of dollars of student debt, right? Finland revamped its curriculum to emphasize critical thinking skills. It reduced the importance of scores and standardized tests, so it got rid of this competitive thinking model, like, oh, let's label these students as being bright based off their test scores. No, let's just really encourage them to think critically, to actually learn for the sake of learning rather than learning for the sake of, acing a test or whatever the case may be. And by doing so, they eliminated academic tracking before the 10th grade as well. So that means that before a student got into 10th grade, they could not be placed in any type of track. They could not be labeled as learning disabled, or they could not be labeled as, privileged or as academically gifted, etc. All students received the same curriculum, at least up until the 10th grade. And in doing so, they really got rid of a lot of those opportunities for teachers to intentionally or unintentionally enact their biases on students by tracking them up or down based off of their perceived qualities. Finland built many more public schools to enable the average school to have fewer number of students, and there are currently no private schools in Finland either. And this is important because that means that all of the schools in Finland are public schools, which mean they all are going to have equal access or equal opportunities to receiving public funds, right? Private schools don't receive public funding the same way that public schools do. They don't receive federal or state funding the way public schools do. And so oftentimes they're able to charge their students or charge the families of students high amounts of tuition and use that privately funded money to, hire top of the line teachers, have top of the line resources. And as we talked about, that creates an educational disparity when we have certain schools that have access to the best teachers, have access to the best educational resources, and other schools that don't. So Finland is really doing what they can to level the playing field here and to ensure that they're providing high quality education to all of their students, and not just by providing elite education to students who can buy their way into the best schools. Finland also increased funding of its schools so that its schools are now well maintained and well equipped, again getting rid of a lot of that educational disparity based off of socioeconomic status. And Finland provided free medical and dental care for children and their families, and has expanded a number of other social services, including 3 years of paid maternity leave and subsidized daycare. 3 years of paid maternity leave. Do you know how much paid maternity leave women in the United States are guaranteed? 0. None. You are not required to receive any paid maternity leave in the United States today. Any at all. And subsidized daycare, forget about it. That is a privilege afforded to few in the United States. As the country realized that children's health and home environment played critical roles in their educational achievement, Finland realized, we can't just look at inequalities within education within a vacuum, right? Finland is thinking with the sociological imagination. I love it. They're recognizing that in order for people to succeed in school, we need to recognize that their home life plays a significant role in that an individual's health and access to healthcare plays a significant role in an individual's ability to be a good student, right? Think about that. If you recognize that, a student may have problems at home, or that a student may be forced to work at the age of 14 or younger just to support their family or to support their healthcare costs because they can't afford healthcare, those play an impact on how an individual is able to succeed educationally. And so by working to not only address social problems specific to education, but also by addressing social problems that affect a person's socioeconomic standing, that affect a person's family life, that affect a person's health, they're able to address this problem in education from a systemic perspective, and they're really able to do some positive good here, right? The effects of Finland's education reform have been extraordinary. Finnish students consistently rank among the smartest amongst the world. far smarter than us in the United States, realistically. Finland is one of the safest countries in the world with one of the lowest crime rates. So we're starting to see that this increase or this improvement in the quality of education is having these kind of ripple effects into these other social structures that used to be big problems. Their crime rates are going down, right? Presumably as a result of more people being able to perform academically and to achieve higher graduation rates in high school and in college, able to secure higher paying jobs that minimize the need for many people to engage in criminal activities in order to sustain their families and their households. According to the 2019 World Happiness Report, Finland was the happiest nation in the world. I think the United States ranked something like 17th on that list of the happiest countries in the world. So look at this. All of this paints this really holistic and systemic picture here, right? By addressing these problems in education and by further addressing problems pertaining to family life and problems pertaining to health, by making access to healthcare and access to education accessible to everyone, Finland has improved the quality of life for everyone in their country, right? So this is the power that addressing these social problems can have. If we enact some of these solutions, we could likely experience some of the same benefits that Finland has experienced. So what, again, can we do? Let's start thinking about us as autonomous individuals in our society. What can we do to address these problems associated with education in the United States? Well, something you can do as college-educated students, recognize that you have a privilege. Being college-educated is a privilege. Not everyone has access to this opportunity. We are in a very privileged space. So let's use our education. Let's use the resources that we have at our disposal to help those that don't have the same access and opportunities that we do. We could volunteer to be tutors at schools or at local after-school programs, especially consider doing this in schools that have lower property values, schools that are more poorly funded and less likely to have resources such as tutoring or after-school help available to their students. We can also attend local school board meetings and voice our concerns about issues contributing to unequal education. You know, whenever a school in your district has a school board meeting or is electing a school board official, we should be invested in those votings as we are in voting for local legislature or voting for presidents, right? That's a very important aspect of being a contributing member of the society that we live in. You know, if we elect people to school boards that approach education from a more holistic perspective, voting people onto school boards that recognize the inequalities and the problems that exist, and encouraging to elect people into those positions of power that have agendas set forth to improve educational opportunities for everyone, especially for marginalized communities. That's really some meaningful work that we can do at the local community level. If your college or university has low numbers of low-income students, you could work to establish a student group that encourages your school to admit more such students. A really popular and contentious topic in the realms of education today is that of affirmative action. So this idea that, you know, colleges and universities should reserve a number of spots for admission for students from low socioeconomic status, for African American or Latino students or other students of color, for women students, etc. And that gets a lot of people pissed off because again, this very individualistic mindset we have in America is that I worked hard for my job. You know, I worked hard to get into this college. Why should a student who is on my same level or even below my level in terms of test scores, in terms of extracurriculars, etc., get admitted into college over me when I have better credentials? But stop. Take a second. Get up in that hot air balloon and think about that. Why do you have those better credentials? You know? Is it because you came from a privileged background? You know, are you white? Are you male? Are you able-bodied? Did you come from a wealthy family? Do you have college-educated parents? Did you have all of those doors opened up to you to help you succeed, to get that higher GPA, to participate in those extracurricular events? Now, what about the lower class student of color who's a woman, who has a disability, who didn't have those opportunities that you had, but still worked hard to graduate and maybe doesn't have a 4.0 GPA, but they still worked hard. They got out of high school and now they want to go to college. It's important to recognize that making more opportunities for oppressed people just to get the same opportunities that privileged people take for granted every day is not a disadvantage to privileged people, right? We've been privileged our entire lives. I'm talking to white men specifically, as I am one of them as well. I've been privileged my entire life. So making open opportunities for students to get equal education is not disadvantaging me. It's just leveling the playing field.